trouble paying attention, controlling impulsive behaviors, and being overly active, all symptoms that so commonly get tested and bucketed into the diagnosis of ADHD. But having talked with hundreds of parents about this diagnosis and the natural ways to help it, there is still a lot of confusion on if a child actually has ADHD. What are the causes, and how can we help them without medications that are just numbing their personalities? In this video, we're going to look at ADHD through a lens different than just a diagnosis, unpacking it to see the symptoms, and then how the brain and the nervous system influence these systems of the body that bring about the attention, the focus, and the impulse control struggles. We'll go back to a main root cause to truly make sense of it and find answers to address the difficulties that parents and these kids are facing. This video is for parents who are looking for drug-free options. They may have heard from a teacher, school administrator, or a counselor that medication is the only way or the best option, but that advice just doesn't feel congruent with their beliefs and what they know to be true. Additionally, many dads, and sometimes moms too, will attribute ADHD symptoms as genetic, right? I struggled with this as a kid, so it makes sense that my kid does too. We're going to get into that more. We're going to take a look at ADHD, though, through a very different lens. So ADHD isn't just a struggle within the brain, it's also a struggle with the entire nervous system's input to the brain. ADHD isn't just hyperactivity, it can turn into a huge energy drain, actually, as we get older, especially later in those elementary and teenage years, when that nervous system has been wound up for so darn long that it eventually becomes worn out. ADHD isn't just a busy, overwhelmed brain by itself. The body can be overwhelming the brain too, and that flood of excess stressful information from the body causes the entire central nervous system to be stuck in fight or flight mode. The question that most parents have is, where does this neurostress within the body come from? And the quick answer is from 4 key stressors that are often overlooked. Number 1 is high stress during pregnancy or a high-risk pregnancy. So pregnancy can be stressful in and of itself, but add in all the extra prenatal testing and interventions, and it is no wonder that mom and the baby's developing nervous system shift into a fight or flight mode early on, that protective state. And that becomes harmful if it remains stuck there and doesn't balance out. A second key stressor is birth intervention. So forceps, vacuum extraction, C-section, or even induction, which is pretty darn commonplace in the birthing world right now. All of that places a physical component of stress within that baby's nervous system, most often in the upper neck and shoulders, and that overwhelms the neuromotor development. We're talking sitting, rolling, crawling, walking in the right order and at the right time. Stressor number 3, a fussy or colicky infant who struggled with reflux or chronic constipation that persisted so long it overwhelmed the autonomic or the automatic nervous system. Stressor number 4 is frequent ear or respiratory infections before the age of 3 years old that were also treated with antibiotics. Those repetitive infections and antibiotic use further add stress to the autonomic system and the vagus nerve in particular, which is the primary controller and the connector between the gut and the brain. So when the nervous system gets overtaxed and overworked with those 4 stressors, the signals that it's sending to the brain are full-on protection mode, fight or flight messages to every area of the brain, including the cerebrum or the motor centers, which cause kids to not be able to sit still. Those fight or flight messages also affect the midbrain or the limbic system, specifically the hippocampus, and that affects focus and attention, and then the prefrontal cortex regions as well. And those are things that affect socialization, situational awareness, and the ability to self-calm and regulate. So ADHD isn't just hyperactivity. An overwhelmed body and brain can cause brain fog, focus, and attention issues, and if not addressed, can be a huge energy drain for our kids. This is actually quite common to see with ADHD, especially if they've struggled with all 4 of those stressors that we just talked about above. They're going to be more wound up, but overall they are worn out instead of hyperactive. And here's why that happens. So when the nervous system is in that sympathetic dominance or fight or flight for a long time, high energy, low sleep, constant stress, it eventually burns out, and then demotivation, tiredness, and grumpiness sets in. Yes, genetics can influence these behaviors, but not nearly as much as we think. The nervous system, vagus nerve, and its development play a much bigger role. There's actually been multiple studies done by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a PhD biologist, and he studies epigenetics. And it is estimated that no more than 15% of our genetic code determines our outcomes. This means that 85% is up to us people. Our genes are influenced by our internal and external environment, and that's actually incredibly encouraging, meaning even though dad may have struggled with attention-focused ADHD, it doesn't mean that their kids have to. Let's put it all together and close it out here, okay? Kids struggling with ADHD most commonly have a significantly imbalanced and dysfunctional nervous system. This condition is known as dysautonomia, and the most common presentation of this is an overactive and excessive response within the sympathetic or gas pedal part of the nervous system. And as a result, an underactive and understimulated parasympathetic or brake pedal side of the brain and the nervous system. Our work as pediatric chiropractors focuses on addressing that subluxation or stress and that vagus nerve dysautonomia challenge directly. We get the sympathetic nervous system unstuck, and in turn we're activating and stimulating that parasympathetic brake pedal side of the nervous system with each and every adjustment. While each individual adjustment is able to stimulate and activate the nervous system in a certain way, it really takes time and it takes repetition to make long-lasting changes within the brain and within the autonomic nervous system. Most parents and caregivers, they'll begin to report positive changes in the first few weeks, especially for the younger children, and over a matter of a couple of months for our older teenage children, young adults. Many others will actually report improvements within the first week, okay? Every single kid's nervous system is as unique as their thumbprint, and so is their response to care. So the term for this change within the nervous system that we see via time and repetition is called neuroplasticity, and it's a natural and normal part of brain development in kids, and it's also extremely important in the recovery from traumatic birth or even brain injuries later on in life. We start first in our office by taking an in-depth, personalized case history on each child. And then the most exciting aspect of our work is that we can directly measure a child's subluxation patterns and that dysautonomia that we talked about via an incredible piece of technology called an insight scan. It's actually a series of 3 separate scans. I'm sure you've heard us talk about them before. This is the most essential step in helping a child with ADHD find those drug-free care options, as it allows us to truly narrow down the foundational root cause elements discussed throughout this entire video. So for more information, I'm attaching an article below. Please read it and share it. Remember, there are medication-free options available. ADHD isn't a genetically predetermined issue, and it's rooted in the nervous system, which means it can be changed long-term. We're here to help you. Please reach out with questions, share this information with anybody you know who could benefit from it, and we'll get them some help too.